Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out this morning. First up, we have our second keynote presentation after John Hawthorne's great keynote presentation yesterday. We have a couple people from Glossier. First up, we have Bryan Mahoney, who is a veteran of speaking at many SprieConfs in the past and a person who's been in the scene for a long time. He's a partner at Dynamo and is currently the VP of Engineering? VP of Engineering at Glossier. Also, we have Jess Sheft-Ason, who is from Glossier, and she's a product manager. They're both out of New York, so please give a warm welcome to our keynote speakers for this morning, Bryan and Jess.
Cool. So thanks, Gregor. You did a really wonderful job both pronouncing my name, Jess's name, and Glossier. Glossier, the pronunciation gets mangled an awful lot, so I think we're off to sort of a good start. As Gregor said, I've been involved with Spree for a very long time. I think a lot of people were saying they've been working with it yesterday since 2012. I go back all the way to 2009. I met Sean at a RailsConf in Las Vegas. I don't even think it was called Spree back then, but I told him that at Dynamo we were getting involved in e-commerce, and he said, okay, I'm working on this really great framework. You guys should check it out. I checked it out, and the rest is history. 7 years later, I still really like working with it. I'm going to say Spree an awful lot today. When I say Spree, I mean Solidus. I'll try to do my best to say Solidus, but to me, they're still the same platform, I guess. Solidus is, in fact, much better. So I'll skip forward here. I'm Bryan. I am now the Vice President of Engineering at Glossier. I've been there on a full-time basis since 2015. Prior to arriving in New York at Glossier, I was heading up technology at Dynamo, a company that I co-founded with Alex Nemiroff in 2000. Dynamo's niche was really e-commerce. They do an awful lot of work in that space with venture-backed startups in New York and in the Bay Area. And this is Jess.
And I'm a product manager at Glossier, and I've been there since December of 2014.
Cool. Before we actually get started with our presentation, I wanted to take a little bit of a trip down memory lane. This is meant to be the keynote, so I wanted to remember some of my favorite moments from my past SprieConfs. The first one I went to was in 2011. It was in a very warm room in New York. Very, very warm, in fact. And I thought I would be really helpful and maybe a little bit funny by sending out this tweet. This is going back 1,548 days. This was my attempt at humor. Please crank the heat at SprieConf. I mean, it was really sweaty in there. This worked, actually. They didn't crank the heat, but they did, in fact, turn on the AC. The room got more comfortable. I got a couple of cheap laughs. 1084 days ago, we were at SprieConf in DC. This time, Alex was actually presenting. It was a design-centric presentation, a look behind the scenes at rebranding, relaunching a digitally native brand, something that I'm very familiar with. And that went really well. I celebrated Alex getting ready for that presentation with this tweet. At Nemi getting locked and loaded for his talk at SprieConf. I didn't want David Jones to be the only one to post a photo of a Canadian rugby player with his eyes closed. So here's my attempt. Alex's talk was really great. I'm a little bit biased, but it was very well received. It was great to have a bit of a design voice at what was a very tech-heavy conference. He had his eyes open for the majority of his presentation, just not here. I like that hairstyle. You should probably bring that back. During that talk, Alex introduced us to two really wonderful hashtags. I'm sure they're still trending today: muffin top and shirt dress. I was on the lookout for these offenses yesterday. I didn't find any. We're a pretty well-dressed group in 2016, so keep up the good work. If you see any of these today, make sure to Instagram them, tweet them, Snapchat them, all these sorts of things that I'm not sure exactly how they all work. 805 days ago, it was my turn to present at SprieConf. I shared some insights, some ideas about how we could all make our mobile checkout experience a little bit better. Right after I gave that talk, Bryan Quinn tweeted this at me. One of the best talks at SprieConf has to go to @BryanMTL's Good Practices for Responsive Mobile Commerce. I was really humbled by this. I thought this was great. And Bryan's not here today, but I'm sure most of you recognize the name. hopefully have had an opportunity to work with him or at least collaborate with him. He is not only an extremely talented developer, but a really wonderful person. And I have to say that if he were here today, I'm sure he'd be so proud of what this community is now doing with Solidus, a platform that he gave so much to and has been such a sort of a large part of shaping its past and ultimately where we're going today. Brings us to present day. So a day ago, I sat here for day one of Solidus Conf. I'm honored to be here today with Jess, kicking off day two. Last night I was out to dinner with what I call my two teams, Dynamo and Glossier. We're here in Toronto. We're participating in this really, really nice event. And I was sort of just struck by the fact that these two teams are together because of this platform. A platform that, yes, has some technical debt, yes, has some problems, yes, can be a little bit slow, yes, can be hard to test, all these sorts of things. But I have been a cheerleader for it since kind of the first day I started working with it. I continue to try to encourage my teams to embrace it, to make it better, encourage our customers to get behind it. And for the most part, that's worked really well. So I want to say thanks for being here, for being a great community, for continuing to push this platform forward. The last 7 years have gone really quickly, and I'm really looking forward to the next 7 years. So yeah, thank you. Okay, final part of the preamble, I promise. Before we get started, a couple of confessions. Confession number one is this talk is still a work in progress. This approach that we're going to talk to you guys about is still a work in progress. We're really bullish about it. We're excited to get some feedback, and we're kicking it off with this talk. Confession number two, we are still using Spree at Glossier. We started the project at 2.1, we moved to 2.2, we moved to 2.3, we're now on 2.4. Each one of those migrations sucked. We are hard at work migrating away from Spree to Solidus. It would have been really cool to kind of live launch it right here. It's not ready, it's in QA right now. It's going to happen soon. And I know this is Solidus Conf, and we're supposed to be talking about e-commerce. We're not going to talk very much about commerce at all. We're really going to focus on content and actually how we're managing it today at Into the Gloss and Glossier. Okay, I've said Glossier 100 times now. I've pronounced it well each time, I think. What I'm going to do is hand over the mic to Jess. She's going to introduce you guys to Glossier, because you're not necessarily our target audience, so you may not have seen it before.
I used my products this morning.
Nice work. Thank you.
Rachel.
I did too.
Jess hooked me up before I came here.
Yeah.
We have
look
some
great.
product for you guys, not for everyone.
Okay, so at Glossier, we sell beauty products, and we are a digital beauty brand born by content and fueled by an online community. And how do we do that? Well, like most, we started with content. Unlike most, we started with content, but we didn't really manage it in the best of ways. And this is our content site, Into the Gloss, which we also call ITG. Here's our website. We feature a lot of interviews with women, featuring their top shelf. This is our flagship product, where women are interviewed and they talk about what products they use day and night, how they use them, how they incorporate them into their routine. These are some famous people that we featured on the site. This is one of my favorite models, Iniko, showing off all her beauty products. And so when we started interviewing all these women back in 2010, we got a lot of data about what women like and what kind of beauty products they're looking for. So in 2014, we decided to launch Glossier, where we were going to directly sell those beauty products to our community. And that is Glossier. This is our website. These are new balms that we recently launched. And this is some of our isms. And some of our campaign photography. We sell skincare. And we recently got into selling makeup as well.
Cool. Wow, thank you. Just one last note on that. We hear an awful lot today. You probably read an awful lot about content and commerce. I think the typical path to content and commerce is you start with commerce, and then you're like, holy shit, I need to develop a lot of content to push people to buy the products that I'm actually trying to sell. And we did it the other way around. So we owned content for 5 years, a lot of content. I think we'll get to numbers in a sec, but Into the Gloss has 1.5 million unique visits a month. That's a lot of people coming to consume an awful lot of content. And we've parlayed that into commerce in a sort of a really interesting way. This is a slide that I presented at a board, part of a board deck that I presented to the board of Glossier a couple of months ago, where we looked at our current tech stack. Here's our 2 digital products today. We had Into the Gloss, which until a couple of months ago was this monolithic PHP, very classic WordPress application for all of our editorial content. And then we had Glossier, which was a Ruby, Spree based site. It was API-centric in the way that it was architected, so we threw out the front-end views. It was a single-page application. It was serving up all of it was basically handling all of our commerce requirements. We had this concept of user accounts powered by Devise. And then we had this like CMS Lite. So for all of the content that we needed to manage that wasn't commerce related, we built these homemade tools. In fact, this slide is a little bit disingenuous. This makes it seem like the CMS was decoupled from Glossier, but in fact it wasn't. I mean, these are just things that we tacked onto Spree. Never felt all that great about it. So we're like, this is the state of the union. These things don't talk to one another. We're producing a ton of content on Into the Gloss. We're producing a ton on Glossier. We wanted to bring them closer together. We also wanted to have a convergence with our tech stack. So we're maintaining PHP and we're maintaining Ruby and Angular, and we wanted to bring that a little bit closer to home. So we wanted to sort of net out with Ruby. So this is what we presented. This is what we presented to the board. This is what they bought into. We said, we're so good at producing content, we want to remove the content management piece from both of our applications. We wanted a common API-first CMS. It was supposed to be in the cloud. And the goal was this was going to become a repository for content for the entire organization. Content that we could share across our 2 current digital products. We had an awful lot of ideas for future digital products, so this would become the basis for that. We'd have shared user accounts, and we'd still maintain our API-driven custom e-commerce engine based on Solidus. Everything would happen magically with APIs, and it would be up to the client, the platform-agnostic client, to decide how it was going to display that information. So this was the vision, and they bought into it. They're like, yes, do it. So we did it. Well, almost. There's a data piece to this too. So data is important. We have a pretty large data warehouse. We do visualization with a tool called Looker. We aggregate all of our behavioral data with Segment. If you've spoken to me in the last year, you've probably heard me go on and on about Looker. I'm not a sales rep for Looker. I'm also not a sales rep for Contentful, although some people in the room will think the contrary. If anyone wants to talk more about Looker after, I'm happy to do that. So let's take a look back at how that little dangling CMS piece that was on that previous slide, how that came to be, the patterns that we applied to solving content management problems in Spree were something that we've started a long, long time ago, and we sort of repeat them, the same mistakes over and over and over again, which is why I'm excited about this approach, because it finally feels modern, it finally feels right. So we started out really simply with Glossier. We had a couple of products. I think when we launched, we had 5 SKUs. We had maybe 5 supporting pages, like 5 static pages that we implemented completely statically, hard-coded HTML. That was it. Life was really good, actually. Fast forward a couple of months, we're selling an awful lot more product, we're introducing more product, we're also introducing more content. So all of a sudden this static approach, static HTML, doesn't feel so great anymore. Of course we can make changes quickly, we don't have to worry about internationalization, but every time we want to make a text change, we need to deploy it. That's not so fun. But at this stage, we're still optimizing for speed of delivery of features. We're not necessarily thinking about how we're managing content. We're not thinking about platform maintainability. Fast forward a few more months, we've added way more products. We've added way more content. It's still kind of manageable, but we're feeling some pain. So as Jess alluded to, we've launched Makeup. With each new product that we're launching, our PDPs are getting more complex. We're introducing more content blobs, more content chunks, more pieces of content that are encouraging people to engage with the brand and ultimately buy the product. Each time, though, we're adding more complexity to the application. We're now adding videos. We have category landing pages, all things that a sophisticated, grown-up e-commerce site should have. Fast forward a few more months, more product, more content, and we are now decorating the product model at a fast and furious pace. So this is probably something that you've all done. It's very simple. You just add a couple of attributes to the product model, add some of these corresponding attributes to your view, and you're sort of done. Some more product pages. We're now at the point where managing content really sucks. Life isn't nearly as good. We're feeling more and more pain. We have database migrations every time we need to launch a new product. When we do launch, it's like this fast and furious copy content from staging, push it to production, dance, that just doesn't feel right. Also, the organization has gotten bigger. So when we launched Glossier, I think we were 15 people. We're now 35, 36. An awful lot of that team produces content. We're a very large team of editors. So we needed more sophisticated tools to allow them to continue to do their job effectively. So that brings me to the sort of the meat of the presentation. So we had called this talk originally Content and Commerce in Real Life. We could share some insights into how we produce content, how we seed content, how we seed the idea for products on Into the Gloss, and how that ultimately drives people into the funnel on Glossier. But I think for this audience, what we're more excited to talk to you guys about are good practices for managing the content portion of Content and Commerce. This is really a look behind the scenes at how we've made creating and managing content for Glossier and ITG sane, maintainable, and actually fun. People are having fun now managing content. Why good practices? I'll just skip over that. So let's talk about how we actually got here. What was the path to improving our CMS? How did we actually get to a solution that we liked? Attempt number one, we're calling the stuff it in the product model approach. This is something that we got away with for years. Step one is decorate the product model. You add a migration. You sprinkle in some deface to extend the admin. You maybe add a request spec or two. You add your newly created fields to the UI. You push it to production. You celebrate because your work here is done. And you did this in probably a day. So the organization is now thinking, well, this is easy. You know, we could just customize whenever we want. We can push it to production. This is great. Not so fast, because now we're starting to manage pain. Those 2 extra fields that we added in a day have now become 10 extra fields. We stuffed a markdown editor in them. We replaced that markdown editor with a lightweight WYSIWYG editor. We've given our content managers the keys to the product and order management system. This was really important for us. We had 5 or 6 people who were in there managing product content, but there was no roles, there's no permissions in this pre-admin, so they had access to everything. They had access to users, they had access to orders. Yes, we could have built a permission system, but it just didn't feel right for us. You probably need to schedule content changes, all things that we can do, all things that we can add to this pre-admin, but we wanted to keep this pre-admin clean. We wanted to keep it focused on order, product, commerce product management, not content. Oh yes, embedding images via the WYSIWYG editor. This is, of course, a really important request. So that sucked. We decided to rip that out, and what all good developers do at this point is we applied this principle of gem-driven development. So we took out all of those extensions from our core application and we stuffed that logic into smaller extensions. So we add Spree solid as static pages, Spree jobs, Spree FAQ, Spree press. We hit bundle install, we push to production, and we celebrate because we've removed a lot of complexity from our host app, removed it. We've stuffed it into our gem file, but now we've got way more CMS firepower, or seemingly. Still the same problems though. We still have people logging into the Spree admin, still working with the same clunky views. It's slow to develop, it's still painful. We are maintaining CMS features when we should really be focusing on our commerce features. We should be focusing on improving our UX. This was still very painful. We didn't stick with that approach for very long. The next thing we tried was active admin. So a show of hands for people that have heard of active admin or have used it before. Okay, cool. So I like active admin, and I sort of think that this was a step in the right direction. This was a step towards a headless CMS. We moved the non-commerce pieces out of the commerce domain. we introduced a second type of admin user. So we mounted active admin outside of the admin namespace. So people who were managing content, we just directed them to their own area of the site. So that felt okay. One of the parts of active admin that I like the most is it's a DSL for admin views. And I think that that's better than deface. It was easier for us to extend. It introduced this sort of design pattern that encouraged content-driven modeling. So the way that we used active admin is we would implement static pages. We would get the design right, we would get the UX right, and then we'd start replacing that static content with dynamic pieces that were being powered by active admin. So this was okay for a little while. It wasn't all roses though. There was no real API for the front-end view, so we had to implement our own API. Possible conflicts with dependencies. Active admin is not a tiny project, so we're still adding an awful lot of complexity to our commerce app. Ultimately, it's really great for CRUD interfaces, but it wasn't ideally suited to content management, so we found ourselves falling into the same trap. We would be adding WYSIWYG editors to active admin. We would be adding drag and drop images, the ability to schedule. We were adding all of these content management pieces that we'd taken out of Spree, and we were stuffing them into active admin. Still not great. And we were also still stuck in this rut of thinking like a traditional CMS. So a traditional CMS, like WordPress, like Refinery, like Alchemy, like Drupal, thinks in terms of pages. Pages as currency. We didn't have pages. We had chunks of content that we wanted to inject into our product pages, chunks of content that also lived on Into the Gloss that we wanted to be able to compose in interesting ways, perhaps differently for mobile than for desktop. If we have a native application, we want to use those content chunks. We don't want to just think about pages. We don't want to think about pages that are heavily marked up with HTML. What we didn't try, and I don't want to throw any CMS under the bus here. I'm not trolling anyone here, but we never tried to mount a CMS alongside of Spree. And not just at Glossier, but I've worked on a ton of Spree stores. I've never tried to do this. I see it talked about in the Spree community an awful lot. And just because you can do it, I don't think you necessarily should do it. We should be prioritizing optimizing our commerce features, not necessarily taking on the pain and responsibility of maintaining our own open source CMS. This is a sure path to pain, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, there had to be a better way. And around this time, when I presented this slide, I was also doing an awful lot of reading about the arrival of these headless CMSs, these hosted services, things like Contentful, things like Prismic. And they felt right. They felt like, here is this service that is providing an API that I can consume to get the content that I want without needing to worry about all of those content management tools that I don't want to manage, that I don't want my clients to have to manage, that I don't want my teams to have to manage. We test drove Prismic, we test drove Contentful. We settled on Contentful at Glossier, and we're really happy that we did. What's up next? Okay, there's another slide here somewhere. Okay, a couple of disclaimers before I talk to you about how we've implemented Contentful at Into the Gloss and Glossier. This is not a sales pitch for Contentful. This is a sales pitch for you to embrace the notion of a headless CMS. I think it can help you out an awful lot. Yes, Contentful is a hosted solution. It is not open source, but the libraries to connect to it are. So Jess is actually going to talk to you about how we got started. Our journey began with Into the Gloss.
Thank you, Brian. First, do this on intothegloss.com. It seemed like a better place for kind of testing features, seeing if we liked Contentful before doing this on Glossier. We built a custom Ruby app. We also re-platformed without adding any features. So this means that when we launched with Contentful, our website looked the exact same the day before we launched as it did the day after we launched. So our WordPress site and our Contentful site looked identical, and this kind of helped us when we weren't adding any new features. We were just really focusing on optimizing all of our content in Contentful. We also worked on our data migration first, so we have over 3,500 posts that ended up turning into 20,000 different entries and 20,000 assets. So before, our posts were like these really big blobs, and since we'd had over 5 years of content, we had a lot of people who were doing different things in these blobs. Maybe some of these editors had known HTML and they'd put a bunch of HTML inside the blob. Maybe they didn't, maybe they'd embedded a video. So what we did was, at the beginning, we looked at all this data and said, how can we get it into more structured content that we can use in a bunch of different platforms. And we also embraced a lot of the constraints that were given to us by Contentful. So I'm kind of level 1 help desk when it comes to Glossier. So this was a little bit scary for me because all of the requests are coming through me. If something doesn't work, if it's not right, people are saying, I don't know how to do this. This is kind of something that when we're using Contentful, there are specific constraints. And one of those was that every editor would have to be writing in Markdown, which I was a little bit nervous about until I saw this, which happened just the other day. This is one of our editors asking for help linking an image, and he says, thanks to Markdown, my new favorite thing, it was very easy and intuitive. And the other editor says, he's a developer. And so this is actually a screenshot from our Contentful admin on into the Gloss. If you go to our website, you'll notice we have a homepage carousel. And I've just chosen a really simple example so it would fit on the slides and look pretty and everything. But these are all the different pieces of content that are going into the homepage hero. And the thing about each of these entries is that they're reusable. So this slider might also be used in a post. It might also be used as like a featured image somewhere else. We're just able to take the content, which we call different entries, and put them into different parts of the site. And then I think I also showed a popular list, which is very similar. These are different posts that we've attached to a list in Contentful. And so then we also decided to do this in Glossier. So we haven't yet launched this, but we are probably going to be launching next week.
Yep.
We're moving from Spree to Solidus as part of this project. It's no longer a single page application. We're using a lot less Angular. And we've removed all of our past CMS sins. It's really great. And we're launching it next week. So this is an example of content on Glossier.com, and I've also, again, only chosen a very small portion of our PDPs. This is our how to use, our benefits, our key ingredients, all information that's extremely important to a customer when they're purchasing our products. And this is how we were previously managing it in the Spree admin. Again, you only see 3 fields, but a page like that probably had around 15 to 20 different fields. And although this is doable, it was actually very difficult because people would have to be copying, like Bryan said, from staging every time we went to production. There's no autosave feature. People would close their browser and say, I didn't see the content change, and I'd say, did you actually click update? They didn't, and then it would be very sad. And this is it in Contentful, so the same amount of content again. This is in the Markdown editor. There's auto-saving features, and we like it a lot. So we've moved, you want to talk about this part?
Go for it. You're doing great.
Okay. We've removed all customizations to products. We've removed all of our CMS-like extensions. And it feels right.
Yeah.
And we really like it.
Cool. Thanks, Jess. It does feel right. And yes, we've intentionally chosen some really simple examples there, but we can do some really powerful things with Contentful. So we focused on showing you how we've removed all of those customizations from the product model. But here are just a couple of other ways that we're using Contentful. So we're using it for product reviews. It's really great for that. It has a write API. So we just have a really nice wrapper. Customers can submit reviews. That content now lives in Contentful. For FAQ, we're using it for press, we're using it for jobs. We're defining related product relationships in Contentful rather than driving all of that through Spree. So we're allowing our content editors, we're allowing product merchandisers to do all of that work in Contentful. It's really fast, it allows us to synchronize between environments. It's just cool, and we're actually just scratching the surface. So Jess talked about the migration on Into the Gloss where we had 3,000 posts. Those 3,000 posts became 20,000 entries. So we started to think less about unstructured content, so the classic example of unstructured is just this big blob in a WYSIWYG editor, to how we could make these pieces of content reusable. So as developers, we always want to make our things reusable. We don't want to repeat ourselves. Structured content fits very well into that pattern. We continue to embrace constraints. Prototyping is easier. This is something that's really interesting as well. So we're doing a lot of content-driven prototyping. So editors can now just kick off new posts, new content types directly in Contentful. And as a front-end engineer, I can grab that content very easily. I can do it in a small Ruby application. I can do it in a static site generator. I can do it using Node. I can do it using React. I can do it however I want. I can turn off my presentation. All of this is great. Most importantly, we're feeling less pain. And there's a real momentum now behind the project. Like, we have come up with a solution that the entire organization is behind, that the teams are really behind. We're excited to launch. So we've bundled together this move away from a single page application, a move away from Spree, a move to Solidus, but also a move to a more sane content management approach. So bringing us back here, this was our goal. When we presented this to the board roughly 8 months ago, we said we were going to do this. And when we launch the new version of Glossier, which will look identical to our customers, we haven't introduced any new customer-facing features, we will have achieved this. And I'm really excited about what that's going to look like. That's it. Thank you, guys. We'll take questions now. Bryan.
So, page loads.
Yep.
You're making how many API calls to Contentful?
A lot. This is a really good question. And the truth is, when we first launched into the Gloss, we were making so many API calls that we couldn't keep the site online. So we launched it. We rolled back a couple hours later. We spent the weekend rethinking that approach. There were some issues with the Contentful gem, the Ruby gem. We weren't able to properly cache the API requests. We solved that in a couple of days, and now it's blazing. So we are smart about the amount of calls that we're making. We're caching that content. Contentful provides webhooks, so when editors go in and they make changes to the content, we're able to, through those webhooks, fire cache expiration calls, and then we warm up the caches again on the next request. We're also fronting into the Gloss with Varnish. So we're caching the hell out of the API requests. We're doing an awful lot of fragment caching on the views. We're using cells an awful lot on Into the Gloss. We're going to eventually use cells on Glossier. I think that's the right approach for working with Contentful. But yeah, a ton of caching. We worked with the Contentful team to solve that bug in their gem. And it's not that painful. Like, it's very classic Russian doll caching that just kind of works. And the same thing is going to happen on Glossier. So we're going to make some API calls when that PDP page loads, right? So Spree is going to provide us with some information, what variants are available, how much it costs, what the name of the product is, but that's kind of it. The rest is going to come from Contentful. I lied. Images are still going to come from Spree, but even that doesn't feel right. We're going to be moving images to Contentful as well. Managing images, image upload, that's more pain as well, and if I can get that out of Spree, that's going to be a win for us. Does that help? Cool. There's a hand up back there. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Oh, Clark. What's up?
You said you manage like a product relation.
Yeah.
And what does that look like?
So Contentful has this concept of linked entries. So like these content types are very sort of generic. You model your content. So we have what we call the sort of the phase 2 set. The phase 2 set is composed of other products. So we'll have those as linked entries. For related products, we do it very much the same way. We have a collection of related products. So then when we're building a page that has related products, we're just able to iterate on top of it. So rather than, there's a related product extension, of course. Rather than using that, we're just using Contentful to manage it in a simple way. It could have just been a one field with a comma delimited string of slugs to define the relationship as well. There was a couple different ways to model it. David.
How do you manage, because you've got a team of people editing a lot of different content, is there a lot of overlap between people accidentally editing the same thing, and does it lock an entry for that, or is there some sort of...
Good question. No idea. Jess, do you know?
Yeah, I do know.
Okay.
It doesn't lock an entry like it would in WordPress, where you can only have one editor at a time. And when you're on the post, it just says Brennan is editing this at the same time, so you're aware. But two people can be in an entry at the same time.
Is there versioning?
Yeah. Right. You can then go back and see like what edits were made by what people, and then jump to version, and then you would just republish that version if that's the one you want to go back to.
See, this is such a great example of a feature that we could absolutely build into a CMS that we're managing for ourselves, if we wanted to. But why do we want to add those features? Like, someone else is doing that for us. Yes, we're paying them, but they're continuing to release new features, and it just allows us to focus on creating great content, modeling that content, getting more and more sophisticated about it. Like, I think the drafts is a feature that they've just released. Like, the new permission system is something that they just released. And it's a really sort of, now this sounds like a sales pitch again, but it's a very sort of developer-friendly company. And they are very open to our feedback. We're constantly discussing what the product roadmap looks like. It's really great. And I have a vested interest. I want more people working on Solidus using Contentful so that we can share patterns. We can say, like, hey, this works for us. This is really painful. This is how we're caching this, so on and so forth.
You see that you also looked at Prismic.
Yep.
What was the considerations between those two solutions?
If memory serves me correctly, and I think some of the people from Dynamo might be able to answer this better than I, Prismic didn't have a write API at the time, and that was a little bit of a deal breaker for us. We wanted to be able to write content via an API rather than just having to log into the admin. At the time, Prismic, their UI looked a little bit better. Contentful's caught up. At Dynamo, we are using Prismic for one content-driven site. I don't think we're going to use it much more. We're kind of become heavily invested in Contentful, and as we've developed more and more of those patterns, it just makes sense to stick with one. But also a great solution. Really fast, works really well. Blue Jay's hat.
Content creation.
Yep.
Are the content editors able to manipulate, say, the navigation, or how coupled are the developers still to that process?
We're still figuring that out. Right now, our navigation is still driven by taxons. And so there is some content duplication. So like those same taxons will exist in Contentful. Like, we haven't really found a solution for that just yet. But I think in a perfect world, like, we want to launch the simplest possible version that we can and then iterate on top of that. So I want the, not necessarily content editors, but product owners to be able to manage that menu. And I'd rather them not do it via taxons. I think that feels right for me. Like, make no mistake about it, the taxon system is really powerful. I really do like it. It can just be a little bit confusing for people. So we're trying to figure out if we're going to use taxons for things like related products or for driving the navigation and all those sorts of things. So for right now, the developers aren't all that involved because we have it running through taxons, so product owners can just go into the admin and change that stuff. But we do need to duplicate some of those taxons over to Contentful to make everything come together. So that's a pain point that we need to resolve. Manageable pain, though. Any other questions? Okay, cool. This was fun. Thanks, guys.